and welcome to Section 1-2 of the Attacks course, Spear Phishing. I'm Lisa Gilbert, and I will be sharing a lot of helpful information so you can understand this type of attack and defend against it. In our discussion of spear phishing, I will first define spear phishing and why it is important to understand and prevent. Then I will explain why everyone is at risk and explore the red flags and warning signs that an attack is taking place. Next, we will discuss some clues that a spear phishing attack may be taking place. We will also explore some of the tactics used by attackers, and I will share several real-life examples. Lastly, I will describe how you can protect yourself and your organization from spear phishing attacks. Before we can discuss spear phishing, we need to understand what it is. Spear phishing is the act of sending emails to specific and well-researched targets while purporting to be a trusted sender. The aim of a spear phisher is to either infect devices with malware or to convince victims to give the attacker valuable information or money, much like phishing. Attackers often use social engineering tactics, which we will discuss later in this course, to research their victims. I already told you a lot about phishing in the previous lesson, but there is an even more effective form of phishing called spear phishing. So what makes spear phishing different? Phishing is often described as spray and pray, meaning a single phishing email will be sent to many recipients in the hope of catching a small percentage of the targeted victims. Spear phishing, on the other hand, is much more targeted toward an individual or a small specific group of people. The attackers segment their victims, choosing something personal or specific to them. They personalize the email when they craft it, so instead of it being addressed to friend or you, it actually addresses you by name. And they impersonate specific senders with whom you have interacted in the past, for example, Amazon or PayPal. Spear phishing is commonly used by advanced persistent threat actors who are targeting very particular information from certain victims. Spear phishing is surprisingly effective. In 2015, 84% of organizations said they had experienced a breach due to spear phishing. Spear phishing is also surprisingly devastating. The average impact of a successful spear phishing attack is $1.6 million. So who is at risk for a spear phishing attack? Spear phishing attacks are far more successful than the untargeted efforts of generic phishing emails. According to a report from the cybersecurity researchers at FireEye, spear phishing emails had an open rate of 70%. Further, 50% of recipients who open spear phishing emails also click the enclosed links, which is 10 times the rate for mass mailings. Consequently, the average person is even more at risk for a spear phishing attack than a more general phishing attack. What are some of the indications of a spear phishing attack? In a targeted attack, the criminal is more likely to impersonate someone you know. They may obtain this information through various social engineering techniques you will learn about later in this course, or through data breaches. They will often register a lookalike web domain that is a single letter different from a trusted domain. We'll see that in the next lesson. The message may come from someone you think you recognize, such as a work colleague, but at an unusual time when you would not expect to hear from them. Subject lines are used to summarize emails and convince you to open them. Spear phishing emails frequently use threatening language, a sense of urgency, some type of offer, or just intriguing language. If the subject line seems like it's desperately reeling you in, be cautious. Typical phishing emails are notoriously worded in odd ways. This could be an obvious red flag, particularly if the email is trying to impersonate someone you already know. If it simply doesn't sound like the style in which they would write, be suspicious. As with standard phishing emails, spear phishing emails may contain spelling and grammatical errors. Spear phishing emails are often demanding, using terms like send me, click here, or open this. Be suspicious of emails insisting you take an action. Phishing and spear phishing emails often have a sense of urgency around the action the criminal wants you to take. Their goal is for you to act quickly, so there may be a time constraint to create a false sense of pressure. Spear phishing emails also frequently use threatening language like reset your password in the next 24 hours or your account will be locked, or pay your parking fine today or risk it being increased. Many phishing and spear phishing emails are intended to trick you into clicking on malicious links or opening harmful attachments, either of which may download malware to your computer. Never click a link or open an attachment in an email unless you are specifically expecting to receive it. Here we have another coronavirus email. This one is an urgent message from your management with a dire warning that you will be deleted from the company database, whatever that means, if you don't click the link. Notice they are harvesting your credentials when you click this link. This is a new sneaky tactic showing what the attacker might do with those email credentials they just harvested from you. The first step is to use some phishing scheme to obtain your email credentials, as in the previous example. Once the attacker has those, they can gain access to your email account. The next thing they do is set one or more rules in your email settings to auto-forward every incoming email to them. Or if they're especially sneaky, they will auto-forward emails with specific keywords so you don't become suspicious that you are suddenly not receiving any email. In the third step, they monitor your email activity looking for a financial transaction. Then they use business email compromise tactics to insert false wiring instructions to your financial institution or to you. This is especially cunning because there is no visible evidence of surveillance, and the bad actor can continue to remotely monitor your account even if you change your password because the email rule doesn't change. This is a spear phishing example received by my husband right after we had purchased a house, and even though he's a brilliant engineer, he almost fell for this. He was actually expecting to receive closing documents from our title company, but he realized that this was not the name of our closing agent, and obviously once he looked at it more closely, it was clear the email address is also suspicious. This was a pretty sophisticated spear phishing attack because the attacker knew we had recently purchased a house. An even more insidious form of title company fraud has recently become prevalent. In this attack, the email claims to be from your title company and directs the buyer to wire their down payment to a different account. Since wire transfers are nearly instant, many people have irretrievably lost large sums of money to this attack. This is a recent attack specifically against Bank of America customers. It was able to avoid a company's spam filter, which will trigger on a large volume of email from the same sender because it was only targeted to a few people within the organization. It passed through security checks that verify the sender because it came from the domain it claimed to as its origin, a personal Yahoo account. The email had a valid SSL certificate that had not yet been flagged as malicious. Although it was flagged quickly, it wasn't caught before it could do its dirty work. It actually seemed more credible because it asked victims to update their email address, enter their credentials, and answer security questions, and in doing that, it also harvested even more information than a typical phishing attack does. What can you do to avoid spear phishing attacks? Be aware of the many red flags that I discussed. Carefully examine the address of the sender if it's someone you think you know. Look for URLs that are just slightly incorrect. Be suspicious of a message sent during a time you wouldn't expect. For example, an email from a work colleague coming outside working hours. Pay attention to what the sender's motivation is, if the subject conveys urgency or threats or is simply intriguing. Watch for spelling and grammar errors or word choices that would be unusual from the purported sender. Be suspicious of demanding, threatening, or urgent language. And as always, don't click the links or attachments unless you're expecting to receive them. In conclusion, you have learned what spear phishing is and that everyone is at risk for spear phishing. We discussed many red flags and warning signs of a spear phishing attack and went over several examples of both phishing and spear phishing and what you can do to protect yourself and your organization from an attack. In the next video, we'll discuss whaling, a special type of phishing that targets bigger fish. I'll see you there.